Good morning, and welcome to our
Morning.
podcast, The Practice of Letting Go. We are William Frank Diedrich, John Bailey, and Michael A. Lamaro, the authors of the book, The Practice of Letting Go. And just to show you that is our book. And it showed my whole screen, didn't it? Anyway, that's our book, and it is found at the website, thepracticeoflettinggo.com. Today, this is our third podcast. We're talking about letting go of stress and anxiety. Stress is basically the difference between how you see it and how you want it. It's the gap. You want things to be a certain way. You see how they are right now, and you experience that, what we would refer to sometimes as negative emotion. The problem is when that gap is between something that you can't control and you. Stress, if you set a goal and you can achieve that goal, then that's a good kind of stress because the stress motivates you. But a lot of stress is about unattainable goals, like I wish that person would be different, or I wish this situation wasn't happening. Something like that, where I don't have control over the goal I've set, and so I have ongoing stress. The stress is never alleviated. I mentioned the word anxiety. Anxiety is a form of ongoing stress. It's apprehension, it's worry, and your body experiences it. And I also say that all negative emotions, so what we refer to as negative, such as anger, hurt, resentment, are all forms of stress because they're all in the gap between what you see and what you want to see, how you see it and how you want it. In other words, you're not getting what you want. And so we experience that stress. So we're going to talk about that today. And my co-authors, John and Mike, are going to offer their wisdom and experience. So let's begin. Let me open it up. What are your thoughts about stress and anxiety and how to deal with it?
I guess the first thing that pops in my head is to let people know it's normal. It's not some aberrant behavior that must be eradicated. A certain amount of stress is healthy. Um, it kind of borders on that fight or flight sort of reaction. But I've been anxious before some testing when I was working on my master's. I could be anxious about that. But then when I look at my life and the issues I had with self-esteem and confidence, that was a whole different type of stress and a more problematic sort of stress. It was really more of a disorder
Yeah.
than just a simple stress. But I just want people to know up front, don't beat yourself up if you're experiencing some anxiety, because that's a fairly normal um, sort of feeling.
Yeah, I want to add to that, John. I think that's a great place to start. You know, stress can be healthy, right? How do you distinguish between healthy and unhealthy stress? Unhealthy stress keeps you stuck, right? It's you're aware of a gap, but that gap is holding you hostage and it's preventing you from taking positive
Mhm.
action towards a goal. The good use of stress is when it motivates you, right? When it inspires you or motivates you to take that positive action. And so when you find yourself stuck, it seems like again, the rational mind is telling you that you're right where you need to be, right? There's no impetus, right? There's no impetus to change and move, and that's how you stay stuck. And what I often tell people is it's just as simple as stopping, right? Slowing down and just focusing on something other than the story in your head. That story that is
Mm.
telling you and validating and justifying all the reasons why, of course, you're stuck. The situation's impossible. Anybody in this situation would feel stuck. And something as simple as one conscious breath, Just eyes open, eyes closed really doesn't matter. And just shift your entire focus into that inflowing breath and that outflowing breath. And this isn't, mystical. There's a lot of scientific research that just demonstrates that there is something between the breath and the mind and the body, that connection. And I'm sure we talk about this at length in our book, but it's as simple. It's something we always do, but we seldom pay attention to. So the key is to pay attention to the breath. You don't judge it, you're just paying attention to it. I'm breathing in, I'm breathing out. And you just have to do that for a few times, and it triggers this natural calming effect. It relaxes your body, it calms your mind, calms your emotional state. There's a lot of science behind that. It happens. All you have to do is do it.
The word that comes to mind when you're speaking, Mike, is mindfulness. To be fully aware of what I am feeling, why I'm feeling it, where am I feeling it? Is it in my heart palpitations or my shortness of breath, where a deep breath can alter that state of being? And we many times, especially when we're in a very anxious mode, don't take time to pause. We're going to rush through it, trying to grasp that control or outcome that we're seeking. Where if we just put the brakes on and stop for a moment and evaluate ourselves, what has brought me to this fever pitch? And is it accomplishing anything within my body, my mind, or the environment around me? I mean, the stress level between someone who is OCD and someone like myself who doesn't need a lot of detail sometimes is completely different. And so what the mindfulness does is tailor it to your uniqueness and allows you to work within the framework that exists in your life and trying to prescribe something externally to do. And that just, as I listen to you, Mike, I'm almost calming. As I listen to you, I'm getting calmer.
That's a good
And,
thing.
and I want to jump off that uniqueness point. That's a really good one because we all breathe. There's nothing unique about that, unless you have some kind of, COPD or something, right? Lung disease, and that can happen. But when I'm counseling somebody, I'm always tailoring it to them because they'll say something like, okay, well, that does bring me relief, but then the voice always comes back, right? What do I do? And so there's a whole host of things. And just recently I was talking to a musician and I said, just go to your keyboard and hit the key, any key, doesn't matter. But what I want you to do is place as much of your attention as you can on the sound that emanates from that background of silence and watch that sound fall back into that silence, right? Use your love for music and don't play a song, right? This isn't about composing music. This is about just using that musical note, something that's very familiar to you, and just absorbing yourself in that cycle of sound emanating from the silence and returning back into that silence. And let me know what that does for your state of mind and your emotional being. And he called me back later and said it's like a miracle. I mean, something as simple as just because the key is where are you placing your attention? And you have the choice to place your attention. It's just that it's like a muscle. It needs to be exercised for it to be effective.
Something similar that I've used is to have someone close their eyes and to discern all the sounds they hear.
Okay.
And it's amazing how our brain processes all that,
Mhm.
just like our eyes can scan all the data and visually make a picture in our mind. Well, with the ears, you all of a sudden you realize you're hearing birds, you're hearing wind, you're hearing maybe cars going by, your stomach grumble, whatever it might be. And then you choose which one will you pay attention to. You have the power to choose, well, I'll just listen to the birds. And you have this wonderful uh, or really organic cacophony that's out there within nature and just choose one and concentrate on it. And it's extremely liberating from all the other entangling thoughts.
It's a powerful exercise. I don't want to always take it one step too far, but I always add to that after someone has played with that exercise for a while. I get them to try to shift their focus to the silence between the sounds, right? So if you're focusing
Oh,
on a tweeting bird, right, focus on that tweet, that sound, but recognize that it's not constant. Again, just like that piano note, it will dissolve into silence and seemingly resurrect back from that silence. And so over time, start paying more attention to the silence between the sounds, and it will take you to a deeper place of calmness, I believe.
so that's
Those are
great.
all good points. You're both talking about refocusing attention, and I think that's good. In my experience, when I speak to groups, most of them are smaller groups, and I don't feel nervous or apprehensive at all. But if I have like 200 people in front of me, then that's when I start to feel apprehension. And so what I learned to do was two things. One is to focus on the feeling in my body as opposed to what I'm going to talk about, and just let myself feel it. And the second thing is to tell myself that it's just energy. And I can have it circling around in here, or I can move. So when I start talking, I hear my voice through the sound system. That helps to relax me. And I move my body. I'll use my hands or whatever. I'll walk a little bit to expend that energy. And then I get into a rhythm, and then the nervousness and the apprehension is all gone. So I think mine is more of an emotional approach. It's just let yourself feel what you feel. Like you said, John, it's just normal. So just give yourself permission to feel it, let it run its course. And then, as you both said, breathe through it. But then the thing that you've talked about a lot, Mike, in many of our conversations is the story in your head. And I wonder if you could elaborate on that a little bit about how the story uh, in the head creates so much stress and anxiety in us and what we can do about it.
Yeah, a lot. I mention it a lot because it comes up in conversations a lot. It doesn't take long to talk to somebody before you realize that they are telling themselves a story
Mm.
that is feeding their fear, right? And
Mhm.
that's really the base of stress and anxiety. As you said, Bill, I want this, but I have that, and I'm afraid that I'll never get what I want. And they can go to a really deep, dark place. And so once they acknowledge that their story and the feelings that they feel are intertwined, you can approach both of those, right? You can start, as you said, Bill, with the emotions, right? So just acknowledge the emotions. Talk a lot about this in our book, and they have a shelf life, so to speak. And the more that you just allow yourself to feel that fear, realizing over time that the wolves aren't at the door, right? I'm still here. The fear is here, but there's nothing that is generating that is truly threatening me other than what my mind tells me is threatening me. And so when I'm aware that my story is feeding the fear is validating the story, we need to do something to interrupt the pattern. And this is why I
Yeah.
love things like, changing the thought channel, right? So if I'm on the fear channel, I want to go to the happy channel. How do I do that? Lots of ways. And my favorite is affirmations. So, you can either plug in like a guided mindfulness exercise. You just literally hit play and allow the person that's guiding this mindfulness exercise to replace the thoughts in your head. You can read affirmations. I like to get people to memorize affirmations. And whenever you feel that you're falling back into that fear and you're aware of the story that is validating that fear, you have the choice because you've prepared in advance to start reciting some positive affirmations, inspiring poetry, lyrics to your favorite song, anything that is inspiring you to elevate the quality of the thoughts in your mind towards something positive, which will then reinforce the movement of the emotions that you're feeling in that same direction. It sounds easy,
I think
but when you're trapped, it's like the book of affirmations is right here and I can't reach to pick it up.
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I think that's sound wisdom, Mike. At the same time, I want to be cautious to not make it seem oversimplified. If I'm dealing with phobias or PTSD or some threat, I used to work with the trades and acquisitions in the cable industry. And when somebody was going from one company to another, there's a lot of anxiety. You're in there trying to coach people and encourage them and help them through. The degree of intensity and what that source is may need something greater. It may need some cognitive behavioral therapy. It may need some medication. Uh, it really varies there. So I think for the lion's share, what you've said, it works. But I want people that are listening that are looking for a quick fix. It may not be that. Um, and these things will help you and sustain you, maybe help you to face those challenges, but they may not be a complete fix that you're looking for. There may be something greater needed. And don't be afraid to explore that. Uh, it doesn't mean you're incapable. It doesn't mean that there's some inherent weakness in you. Past trauma affects people in future situations because there's a mental record of, well, I know what happened before, so it looks like it's going to happen again.
Yeah.
And,
That's
you
the
know,
story. Yeah.
yeah. And so you got to address that story and say, what happened before? Does that support a second occurrence of this? Or am I just creating this in my mind that, well, okay, there's a slim chance, but it's enough of a chance that I'm going to be worried about it. Uh, you're really, I had an aunt who had a real panic disorder. She couldn't leave her home. It was almost agoraphobic. Uh, she eventually was able to leave her home, but she would just, and I've had other people in my years of ministry talk to me about getting in a grocery store and just freezing. All of a sudden, they don't know where they're at, why they're there. That's something that's, yeah, take a deep breath if you can, but will that alleviate whatever is happening mentally? You may have uh, some neurological issues, your serotonin, you could be in balance and there that needs something. So I just want to cautious people that don't try to oversimplify it. Go ahead and explore those. Maybe they'll take care of it. But if they don't be afraid to seek additional help to address it, because no one would choose to live in a constant state of anxiety. I believe that we want to have peace. We want to have joy in our life. And, again, I'll speak to me personally. For me, I have to go back into my faith. And whatever your faith is, if you have one, explore that. Because I know the world religions that I have studied, peace is a part of what it wants to offer. This internal personal peace. And so sometimes when you're in a panic, being intentional and wanting to do certain things may not plug in real quick. So,
So John, you
I'm
went to the spiritual. I was gonna take you there, but you went ahead of me. But
No
sorry.
surprise.
there's been times I consider anger or rage to be forms of stress. You're not getting what you want, so you're upset.
Mhm.
And I've had times of extreme anger where I realize that I need to just close my mouth and go to another room because I don't want to say something that's hurtful to anybody. But then the emotion is so overwhelming that I can't just sit there and be with it. And so that's when I take a spiritual approach to just say, hey, help me to see this differently. And so I'm turning it over, and then I do my best to think about something else, which is very difficult because all I want to think about is how wrong that other person is. But usually, with a lot of practice, I come to a place of not thinking about it and actually turning it over. And it's amazing some of the outcomes I get when I totally let go like that. So maybe you could add a little bit to that. With whatever faith or spiritual path you might be on, you can do that.
Yeah, there's a path that I recommend to people, that it doesn't matter what your faith background is, doesn't matter if you have a faith. Everybody has faith in something, even if it's themselves. But when you start talking about a relationship-based stress, and you can plug any relationship in there and it works, there is the two axes that I look at is how important is the issue and how important is the relationship. And I'm going to travel in probably one of four directions, depending on how I evaluate that. So if I pull back, and I find that too, when I get angry, I really want to understand what my anger is based on. And because we live in a very angry society right now, I think. And some of it is righteous and some is very unrighteous. But when I tell someone, if the relationship is really important, then I'm going to move towards a direction of either one or two things. The best is resolution. I'd like to resolve this issue. And so instead of being anxious and worried about it, I would suggest think constructively as how might this be resolved? And how can I open that communications? If it's not a big important issue to me, I may simply just yield, acquiesce, and say, okay, that's fine. It's not a big issue with me, and what you need and want is more important. But if I find that I'm willing to risk the relationship on it, then I'm going to either ignore it and let it fester and make it worse, or I'm going to go for that win. I want to win the debate. I want to win the conflict. And there I can still be, I'll be emphasizing the issue, but the relationship is such a great importance that I'll confront. And like I tell people, sometimes what I had to learn over the years, there's times where you can be a priest and there's times where you got to be a prophet. And I'm dealing with family situations where I've tried the priestly route. It's not working. So I'm going to speak up as the prophet and call out what the issue is and call it for what it is. And it's not a anger expression that is therapeutic for me. It is purposeful. It has intent. And I think that makes a difference in this anxiety level when we are clear in what it is that we're expecting, what we're hoping for, and we're strategically looking at it as how does that get accomplished? And if it doesn't pan out, is it something that can even be accomplished? And if not, where am I willing to let it set? But I don't care what your faith background. Mine is blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called children of God. That I want to be. I want to, as much as it depends on me, live at peace with everybody. But I can't control everybody. And so some people will leave the hatchet buried, and I have to accommodate that sometimes in my life. but I'm not going to stress over it because it's outside of my realm of power to affect change. I hope that makes sense. I rambled a lot.
Yes, no, good
It makes
points.
sense.
Go
Yeah.
ahead, Mike. You can
Well,
build on that, I think.
I think that's a great framework. I really do. And I like the way you brought it back to the spiritual as well. So for me, control the controllables, right? It just that is really at the heart of what you're saying. And the framework to think through, well, do I control this and how important is it to me is a way of guiding someone to understand, is this really within my control? How much do I really care about this? And the spiritual aspect, my favorite prayer, I say it all the time, is that serenity prayer, right? So
Oh,
yes,
yeah.
we're after peace, we're after serenity. And, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And my
Amen.
amen. And my interpretation of that prayer is to make it simple, just acknowledge that there's very little within your control. Right.
Yeah.
Let's just start
That's
there. Right.
that's a big
So
point.
that's the wisdom. I start with the wisdom of, I'm really not in control of that much. So much of the story in our heads is about things we cannot control. So shift that story to, well, what is it within my control? Right? What is possible? I think that's what you were saying too, John. Right? What is possible? And can I break it down into what's important now? I love acronyms. So if you want to win in life, understand what's important now and don't worry about it. Just focus on what you can do now. And that's why I start with a breath. It may not, it's a Band-Aid solution, but it's what you can do now, 100% within your power to use this mind-body connection to just achieve whatever level of calmness is possible. Because when you do that, it opens up a window, right, that allows you to see things as they are, not as your mind is telling you they should be.
Mhm.
Great
I think that's
advice. I like the
important.
acronym of what's
Yeah,
important now, win.
Got a
That's
bunch
a
of
good
them.
that's
one.
good.
Can you add another
I
one?
think
What's
that's
the
what
other one?
I
We'll
think
stick
that's
with that way.
it does boil down that the only thing we have control over is ourselves.
Mhm.
Anything beyond that is by chance, I think. That you might find you have some control over. I mean, I exercised control over my sons while they were growing up, a protective control. Uh, but at some point, I had to let them go, and
Mhm.
the control went with it. you know. So I think that's great wisdom, Mike. Just look at what you can do. And this again, going back to those first steps, I can control taking a breath and pausing for a moment. And I find if I don't respond in anger to expressed anger, I really do have some pretty good control.
Yeah, and Bill's asking for acronyms for now. I love my 4 Ps, right? Where I tell what I'm doing with this conscious breath is I'm pausing, right? I'm hitting the pause button.
Mhm.
And in that pause, right, I am, if I believe in a higher power, I'm going to reach out to that higher power. So I'm going to pray. I'm going to pause. I'm going to pray. And I'm going to ask for guidance in my prayer. I'm going to ask for that wisdom to know the difference. And then I'm going to ponder whatever I feel in my heart as a response. And then, and only then, will I proceed. Right? So pause, pray, ponder, proceed. I found it to be very powerful.
Good one. Yeah.
That's a good one too. Yeah, I've gone into this practice of going into my prayer closet, as Jesus said, and that's my heart. I don't have a closet in the house that I go hide in, but so we make the visual right. But there's times where I don't want to pray for anyone else. I don't want to pray about anything else. I simply say, Jesus, you said you would meet me there. So I'm in the closet. When you show up, we got to talk. And it's just me and him about usually, Jesus said, I can do nothing of myself, but only what I see the Father doing. So my prayers are usually either focused on, okay, what are you doing, God? and help me see it. Or, God, I'm not seeing things, I'm feeling things. Help me to figure out what it is and what I need to do. And when I shut out all the distractions, and I think that helps with anxiety. It was going back to your listening to the sound of that key on the keyboard, is if I just blank out the other stuff and focus inwardly, and for me, in the spirit, the spiritual, there's amazing things that get revealed there. And you have a clearer mindset. You know what direction to go.
It's a good point, John. And we can, of course, expand that whatever your spiritual path may be, if you're not asking Jesus, you're asking spirit, you're asking your higher self, your soul, you're asking God, whatever it is that you tune into. And if you're agnostic or atheistic, then you're talking to your intuition, your own inner voice, which everyone has one, no matter what your belief system is. So what you're saying, John, is really applicable to anybody in any spiritual path, or even if you don't have a spiritual path, it's applicable.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I
I'd
like
like
this idea of the witnessing presence, right? That shouldn't haunt
yeah,
anyone, right? If you're still enough and you tune into that silence, you recognize that there is this other presence that is benevolent, but is also waiting for you to tune into it, right? It doesn't impose itself on us, but it's something that we can discover and realize, and it's within that temple of our heart that we can feel that presence.
I like how
think
Lao
that's
Tzu said, the uncreated light. In the darkness of my moment, I want to go to the uncreated light.
That's good.
interesting. Yeah. All right. Well, we are wrapping up here. Did you have any final thoughts, Mike?
I'm good. I've really enjoyed the conversation as always.
Okay. Anything else, John? A final sentence?
No, I love talking about this sort of thing, and I love exploring it with individuals. So I hope people know they can reach out to us,
Mhm.
and we'll try to be there for them.
Good point. It's important to remember, and I'll end on this, that when you're stressed, you are in fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, which means you're not thinking clearly, because all your energy is going through what you might call your emotional brain, and it's not up here in the frontal and prefrontal cortex where you do your thinking. So if you can get a handle on the stress, if you can let it go, and through the things that we've all three talked about, then your thinking becomes more clear and you have more options.
Yeah.
And in any situation, the person who has the greatest number of appropriate options is the person who will be in control of the situation. If your only option is to get upset, then you're not going to accomplish much. So if you have several options, I can do Mike's 4 Ps, or I can practice, what's the WIN again?
What's important now? Stay
Yeah, if I
present.
can ask myself that. Yeah, if I can pray, if I can take a breath, all those are options that can help me to come up with more thinking options of where we want to go with this whole thing. The question has to be really, what do I want to come of this situation?
Yes. And I want to go back to what John said. If you are overwhelmed and these things just aren't working, seek help. You're not alone.
And we can end on that. Thank you. Thanks everyone for tuning in. You can find more about our work at thepracticeoflettinggo.com, and we will see you at our next podcast.